committee to review purpose and composition, functionality, and effectiveness of standing committees in the town of Barnstable. My name is John Crowe, I'm the chair. To start the meeting, I will say this meeting is being recorded and will be rebroadcast on the Town of Barnstable's Government Actions channel. In accordance with Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 20, the chair must inquire whether anyone else is recording this meeting, and if so, to please make their presence known. Seeing none, this meeting will replay via Xfinity Channel 8 or High Definition Channel 1072. It may be also accessed via the Government Access Channel live video on demand archives on the Town of Barnstable's website. Okay, so we have a roll call.
Councilors Burdick, Clark.
Here.
Crowe.
Here.
Lutke.
Here.
Turkelson. You have quorum.
She's right there.
I just saw her. Okay.
She just called your name.
Kristen Turkelson is here, just to note.
Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna open the floor to public comment. Any public comment? Where are you gonna wait? Okay. We'll move on to discussion on the purpose and functionality of the town's boards and committees and commissions. We have Ann Quirk here today, the town clerk, and she's gonna make a few comments. So Ann, we'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you. When Cynthia sends out the acceptance letters for joining a committee, if they're brand new to the committee, they come into us to be sworn in. And when we swear them in, we find out if this is their first time on a committee, and we hand out this information. And this, they have to fill this out and sign it, and it tells them that this is the open meeting law, and that they need to read and understand these materials, because it's a consequence of not doing the right thing during a meeting. So this is given to them, and we keep the this piece. And then we give them also an acknowledgement of receipt for conflict of interest. And they complete the receipt and return it to us, and they keep the summary with them. But it tells them in here, I'm pretty sure, that they're supposed to go online and actually do the whole thing online, do the test online. I don't even know where that is anymore, but.
The test for
Conflict of interest. Understanding the conflict of interest is to make sure they understand.
It's a training program.
It's a training, yes.
Yeah, they have to
It's
set up,
training.
yeah, they have to set up their own private email and then
Yeah.
with the state.
But it's to let them,
track that, Ann? How do you know if they did it?
their responsibility is to let their committee know that they've completed, because every committee has a staff person. It's not possible for
Not
me.
every committee has a staff person.
Okay, so the committee tracks it. How do they, what do they have to give to the committee? It's up to the committee to say,
We make sure that we sign their letter. They have to bring their letter in. We sign their letter and they take that back to the committee. That should tell the committee that they've received these, and it's up to the committee to track whether or not they're
which is
doing it.
your letter.
That's Cynthia's letter that states that they have been assigned to a
Okay, but
committee.
there's no, they don't have to produce any evidence that they did the online course.
Not to me,
Not to you, yeah.
not to me. I would think that, again, if there's not a staff person on every committee, I don't know what the answer to that is, but
Yeah, but where would the staff person report any deviance from that policy? To Cynthia?
Yeah.
They
Right now,
report
the
to you?
state tracks it. I don't track it anymore.
She can't even see it.
That's why you have to go in when you're given this packet. And the very first thing on the web is municipal employees. You click on that, and then it asks you to set up an email, your personal email, an account with the state, and then you're linked to a video that you have to complete. And at the end of that training, there's a certificate that you print out and complete. Now, whether they print it out and give it to the chair, I don't know. But the current process now is the state that I'm aware of is the one that now tracks them.
And they do track them. So that as of so many years down the road, 2 years, they have to do it again.
We get an email.
And they get an, yeah.
We get an email from the state.
But nobody other than the person would know whether
Yeah.
they completed or not. Just because you get a prompt from the state doesn't mean,
Well, you don't get that prompt unless you've completed it and set up.
I think the crux of the issue, it
Account.
sounds like, is we're doing our best due diligence to let them know what we require from them. But there's a drop off where
There's
we
no
don't actually know
tracking.
if they're doing it. So if they don't do it when they first join the board, committee, or commission, they will not get a prompt. And then we also don't know if they get the prompt if they're redoing it 2 years later. So
If there is a staff person on the committee, they do collect that information.
There's only 3 committees that are not represented by staff members, and they're actually the 3 that are highlighted on your liaison list.
I guess the question is as a group, do we actually know that the staff liaison or the staff person is actually collecting them from new people and ongoing? I don't think we have any data to know they do or they don't. I'm not even stating an opinion whether they do or they don't. I think that's just the likely question would be, how well is that
I know it came up
implied
before,
system working?
it did come up before, Kristen, sorry, Counselor
Yeah,
Jefferson.
that's-
It did come up before, but, and there were staff people that were involved, and I think they were turning them into you originally. So, because she has all the information
Yeah,
from
no,
coming
it's-
through you
it's
of
huge.
who's been assigned where.
sure.
Yeah, it's the appointments committee chair, that's what she was doing, right, Cindy?
Yeah, it used to be required that the chair hand them to me. I mean, I've got files upon files upon files, but when the state took it over, I don't get them anymore.
Well, and I mean, if we think we have 41 boards, committees, and commissions, I don't know how many people are exactly on each one, but I don't know the total number of people that we would be responsible for tracking. It's a lot.
I went committee by committee by committee, and whoever was on that time, I matched it with a folder.
Yeah.
And that folder had to match who was on the committee that they completed it, and it went to the side. Now, I don't know, I think Bill Cole maybe might be the HR, because I was
think he
told there
does
was an
have
HR
access.
contact
Yeah.
I
person.
believe he has access to the system, and
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure, I'm not 100% sure, but I think he also has access for the board and committee members, and it's not just the staff. I don't know how he or when he checks that, but he has that.
Yeah, and I mean,
Yes,
that's
because
a
he asked
big
for-
job
But
for
also,
him
just to
be
mention, when you
doing
said
too.
it's what we require from them, it's state law.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And he does, because he sends me something every year for the election workers,
Oh,
every other
okay.
year, so he knows all this.
So I guess if somebody was not compliant with their certificate after 2 years, how do we ensure that? So,
My guess is the state would reach out if they're getting these,
I
they
got
would
an
know
email
who's
this year,
waiting.
because the
They-
last time I
They
did
changed
mine
the
was
system,
in
they
23.
updated the training
So I had to do
program,
mine
so I
this
don't
year.
completely know how it's set up over there
An
anymore.
email.
But the state is not then contacting the town and saying, John Smith of this committee has
No.
not re.
No, if they're
So-
contacting anyone, they would contact
the
the
person,
individual,
yeah.
and then if the individual didn't do it, they would potentially undertake enforcement action, but they would spend a lot of time trying to first get them to do it, because it's a waste of their time to, prosecute someone for not taking the training program.
Well, I'd like to see, I think if we discussed this before, I'd like to see something that would be a more detailed explanation of what is expected, a code of conduct, and that would be handed out prior or during the application process, handed out of conflicts of interest, and they would put that down and sign it.
So what they're supposed to get, all of us, employees, board members, when you're hired or appointed, you're supposed to get, the Ethics Commission under the law was required to prepare sort of plain English summaries of the law for state employees, for municipal employees, for county employees, because the law changes a little bit depending on which level of government you're at. So there is a summary of the law that every employee and appointee is supposed to receive and sign something saying that they've received it. Presumably read it, but it's basically they say they've received it. So I think that's something that they already get. And I think, in looking at, and I was actually looking at this for the town manager today, I was gonna rework some of the language on his application form, because he wants a form for for boards that he appoints. So I'm happy to share what I do for him with the committee. So in terms of, because the language that's currently on the application is something I had done for the former town council president to rework what she had prepared, and I could beef that up, and I am going to beef it up for the town manager, and I can certainly share that same language with this committee.
Yeah, that's great. I'd like to see that, and also, I think we can go a step further in being plain that if you're on a committee or you are not straightforward with what your conflicts are, that you can be moved because of that reason immediately. The whole
So,
thing is, we've gotten this conflict of interest, we've talked about this before. I think by having somebody actually, affirm that they have no conflict of interest, and also affirm that during their tenure, if their one comes up and they do not immediately, within a certain period of time, let the town know that they have that, or the committee know that they can be moved on the spot, or on very quickly.
so how would that work?
I'm asking you how it would work. What I'd like to see is that done, okay? Because we've had problems in the past with people who've got conflicts. They haven't mentioned those until it came public. Then they mention them, then you get a pass. Okay, I'd like to see that be changed.
So sometimes people don't mention it because they're not actually aware that it's an issue for them. And when they are made aware, and this is my experience, so just bear with me, because I know you have a different view of
Yes, I do.
how things
Yeah.
work. But in my view, what actually has happened is very often people come to me ahead of time and say, can I do this? Is this a problem? And I work with them to make sure they understand how the law applies to them. Sometimes it doesn't work quite as smoothly, and it's not until later on or halfway through or somewhere people become aware that there's an issue that they didn't realize raised an issue under the law, which is very, very common because the ethics law is complicated and people don't always understand how it applies to them. And so when someone comes to me, the first thing I do is try to figure out, how does the law apply? What should they be doing, or what should they have done? And then I work with them to correct it, so that if they should have filed a disclosure and they didn't, we can get them to file it now. That's very much what the Ethics Commission typically, not always, but typically does with people for certain types of disclosures. If it was something very egregious, then I would talk to appropriate folks within the town to figure out how to deal with that. But not every, and I know you and I don't necessarily agree on this, but not every mistake, and people make a lot of mistakes in this area, not every mistake is egregious. Some are, but a lot of them are not. And so I think, and the Ethics Commission takes a similar view in terms of they will tell you their main focus is education and trying to get people to understand how the law works and to comply with it. But it's not an exact science. It's not black and white. I can't tell you how many calls I have had with ethics, both when I was there and also, not being there, where you ask a question and they have to go talk with each other, to figure out what they think the answer is. It's not always obvious when you ask it, oh, here's the answer. Sometimes it is, a lot of times it's not. So I just think ethics issues, they're not all created equal. And I think a lot of the times what you want to do is help people get it right. And if they need to correct something, then they need to correct it. If something needs to be redone, then we redo it. But I don't necessarily agree that if you make a mistake, you should automatically lose your position on a board.
Okay, there's been a number of we've talked about a number of examples that I don't believe are mistakes. I believe people.
I know, and I want to be careful in this.
I know we're not talking about individuals, but I'm saying that these people knew better. Okay, they must have known they had a conflict of interest, and they kept them. That's my opinion. So you have your opinion, I have mine.
Yep.
I'd like to see that stopped. Okay, so can we work on something that doesn't deal with the exceptions, but deals with the actual people who actually do and know and have those conflicts of interest, and only expose those interests when they've been exposed themselves, and then they get a free ride.
So
I'm trying to get rid of the free ride things.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that's that's sort of an unfair way of characterizing it, but I understand that's how you view it. I think if something happens where you think it's so serious that it warrants removal, the council does have in its rules the ability to conduct investigations, and then you would do it with the proper safeguards in place, where you would do it in executive session to protect the person's privacy rights, because that's the way the law is set up for when someone is accused of something, of wrongdoing in some way, or there's a complaint against them. So there's a process that already exists, I think, for that. And if you wanted to codify that people can be removed for violations of the ethics law, you could certainly recommend that to the council, for the council to codify. I wouldn't codify that through an application necessarily. I mean, I guess if you were going to do it, I would have the council put something in place in the code, and then you would reflect that in the application. I don't think the application drives that. I think the council and the council's rules and laws would drive the application. So I think the order is kind of reversed. I also think, just in terms of when you talk about disclosing conflicts, you can only disclose what you know of at any given moment, right? So, and yes, there is an ongoing obligation. So when you take a position on a board, you may correctly say, I have no conflicts. And then some matter comes before the board that triggers a conflict. And in that case, you may have to file a disclosure to dispel the appearance of a conflict. And by filing the disclosure and checking the box saying I can be objective, you're all set. No one needs to rule on that. No one needs to do anything. That's all you need to do. If you have a conflict that involves a prohibited financial interest, then you don't have to disclose it, but you have to recuse yourself. If you don't recuse yourself, then you have to disclose it and ask for permission from your appointing authority to participate in that matter. And until you get that permission, you have to recuse yourself. So the way I look at it is, to me, that's an actual conflict of interest, and the other is the appearance of a conflict of interest. One requires recusal or permission, and one just requires disclosure.
Well, we can go back on this forever, but I'm saying, I know, first thing I want to say, Kristen Turkelson is here, counselor, and Counselor Seth Burdick is here also. I'll get you one question. I just want to finish this up. Cases in the recent past, people have known conflict of interest, they're known to the public, have participated and adjudicated and ruled on this as chairs and other people, and then they have said after that they have a conflict of interest. After the work has been done, after those recommendations by those committees have been pushed to the town council, that shouldn't be stopped and needs to be stopped immediately. So whatever we can figure out to do so, we need to do so. Because it's been happening with the rules we have, with the state rules we have, so they're not working, in my opinion. So,
well, they're working. I mean, you can file a complaint with the Ethics Commission. You can always do that if that's what you want to do. And the Ethics Commission will decide whether they want to prosecute, whether they want to enter into what they call a settlement agreement, where someone just agrees to pay a fine and doesn't have to go through a trial, or whether they resolve it simply by sending a letter, an educational letter that says, here's what you did wrong, you shouldn't do it again, this is what you should have done. That's primarily how they resolve complaints that come before them, and they only prosecute what they consider to be egregious conduct.
I'm not asking for prosecution.
No, I know, but
I'm talking about the people who've done this purposely have gotten away with it. Okay, they've influenced public policy, and that policy has been pushed into the town council. That's the problem we have, and I want to see it solved.
I think when you say purposefully,
I do think purposely.
I know that.
Some of these people knew better, and they definitely knew better.
I think there is a big difference between intentionally violating the law, which I've seen happen, and not understanding that you actually have an issue. And I personally would be careful in how you characterize it, because I think most times people are not intentionally violating the law. They're screwing up. They're making a mistake.
That, you keep saying the same thing. I know for a fact, in a couple of cases, that is not the case.
Okay.
So how are we gonna
Order.
deal with those couple of cases?
Okay, so I think the way to deal with those couple of cases, because again,
I'm talking about prior to them being able
Point of
to do
order.
what they're doing. What?
I mean, where are you going, John, with this?
I want something that's handed out to any applicant to the town of Barnstable for a committee that specifically says that if you purposefully, the conflict of interest roles you have, you've gone the training, if you purposely countermand those or violate those, then you can be immediately removed from the committee that you're on, that you've been appointed to. And I think that is fair. We've had examples where people are not removed from these committees, and they've gone on and their business has been put through the town when they've actually affected the debate, okay? Without saying that they have a direct conflict of interest.
But as it's set up now, those people can still be removed if they're, so let me frame it differently.
They weren't removed.
Well, how many ethics violations have been adjudicated and have found that there has been a willful violation of the ethics code in the boards, committees, and commissions of the town in the last, say, 5 years? Let's use that as a.
when you say adjudicated, you mean by?
Well, if they've been found culpable, or that they have been found to have willfully violated.
But when you say found, by the town?
By the
Ethics
Ethics
Commission? So the Ethics Commission, the only thing you know from what they do is what they do publicly. And
Which
they
mostly
do,
isn't
they do
public.
very little publicly because they resolve most complaints privately through educational letters. So it's not, I can't really
There's no
answer that.
information,
Yeah,
because it is a
I don't know
private
what their
thing.
complaints.
And then how many people have ever been removed from committees by the town council, I wonder, in the last 10 years, or 5 years, a more manageable number?
Do you know of any? I don't know of any.
One in the 15 that I've been here. One. So-
Removed by not being reappointed or just
No, removed, like,
actively being removed?
punitively, like.
In front of the town council.
Oh, okay.
Because the council did an investigation, is that?
Correct, and the person wanted it public.
Okay, so again, the council in its rules has the ability to conduct investigations. Under the open meeting law, you would have to give notice, there's a procedure. You have to give notice to an employee if there is a complaint against them. That employee has the decision whether that gets done in executive session, or the employee can say, no, I want it done in public, but it's their choice. So that's the process if you want to investigate a complaint against,
And it could be, when you say employee, it can, we consider members of boards, committees, and commissions employees. Special employees,
Yeah, I mean, I would.
or just, that would apply to members of boards, committees, and commissions being able to be investigated.
Yes, I would say that the open meeting law provisions would apply to investigations of town board members, if that's what you wanted to do. So that I think, that's the process, I think, if you wanted to do that, because, again, you and I can disagree, but if you were going to actually do that, I think the number of times you would do it should and would be relatively few. And so that would be the process. And if there were things where you were looking to beef up the town code, we could do that. I think that might be the committee on the code for us to talk about. But I feel like the application isn't the way to set new standards. The council has to figure out if there are new or different standards, and then the application would reflect that. I just feel like it's a little backwards there.
Seth, did you
Well,
have
yeah,
something?
just because what I was trying to say, I guess, is that it is all, I mean, I understand what you're saying, obviously, but the mechanisms are already there for bad actors to be removed. And if you believe that this is based on people's nefarious underpinnings, that their intention is to be a bad actor and to be on a committee, board committee or commission in order to leverage their own, that committee's power to their own ends, it's not going to make a difference whether they sign a piece of paper, the mechanism to remove those people or to identify that there's something fraudulent going on or that they violated the ethics laws, that's already there, and our ability to remove them is there. It's just whether the will exists to do that. Do you see what I'm saying? That if you, will it really make any, this is all right there. I mean, if you sign up and then you know that you have you could be removed at any time if you're being, if you're acting in bad faith. And then is adding anything gonna make it, or, do you see what I'm saying by that? That the mechanism to accomplish all these things is already there. And if this is something that is really that big of, if it's endemic to our system here in the town of Barnstable, which I don't necessarily believe it is, do we really need to make it even more aggressive when we're trying to get people? We want volunteers to come and volunteer for these boards, not make people feel like they're criminals in the making when, oh boy, I better not mess up on this one because I might have a conflict. You know what I mean? That's my thought.
I disagree with that. They're signing something in good faith that they don't have if they did, they wouldn't sign it. They're not going on and apply. If they sign it and they're not doing it in good faith, then it needs to be reasonable and fairly immediate actions to take these people off these boards.
But the evolution of the situation is such that you never know what you're gonna have to rule on. Like, you could say that I have a million conflicts, like, should I recuse myself? Not that I do, but like, if you're in business in the town of Barnstable, there are many, many things that you could possibly run, that could touch your official actions. But you have, there's a presumption that you will be dispassionate and you will be able to be, why can't what's the word when you file your disclosure? Objective. A very simple word that escaped me just then. That there's the expectation that you will be objective. And, you'd have to have someone who has no involvement in anything, who lives in a little room and doesn't come out at it. So not be touched by, at some point, by something that you possibly could be construed as having a conflict with.
And I think that's right in the sense that depending on the board, you might have someone who says, yeah, I want to be on this board, but my personal business that I own is this. And so it's very likely I'm going to constantly be ruling on my competitors. That's easy. And you say, you know what, you're probably not the right person for this board. But for most people, it's not that cut and dried. So it's today, I'm not aware of any conflicts. True statement. I get appointed to a board and then someone applies for something who raises a conflict because now they're my competitor or they're my sister-in-law or whatever, something maybe that wasn't on my radar screen, because it's not on your radar screen until something comes before you, and then you have to say, does this create an issue for me? So the day you're appointed, you might be fine unless it's the kind of board where you're like, I'm gonna have conflicts all over the place, and that's an easy one. But otherwise, you're gonna say, either I'm only aware of this because this is happening right now and that's a person that I have this relationship with, or I'm not aware of anything, and that's a true statement, and then something comes up 7 months later before your board. At that point, yes, you then should either file the necessary disclosure or you should recuse yourself, depending on what the issue is. But you won't know that you have that conflict until it actually arises. And so I really do disagree strongly that people in general purposely and intentionally violate the law.
I did not say that. I said there have been people, 2 or 3 that I can call right now, that have done this. And there was no question they knew what their conflict of interest was and acted in their own personal benefit. As one is chairman of the committee, I'm not getting the people, I'm just telling you. So you keep going back to it's all, it's if something comes up, okay, something comes up, I understand that. But I'm talking about people who actually sat in a position where they could affect policy and they had a conflict on that policy. And they actually sat in and did not recuse until after that policy had been sent to the town council. Chris, did you have something to say?
I was actually going to agree with Seth that I think that I would not presume that somebody has intentionally violated an ethics or conflict position, but if you know somebody did, I guess the course of action would be to call ethics and trigger an investigation. Would that be
Well, at the
the?
time, I was not a counselor, okay, I don't have the power that I have now to say, hey,
No,
look
I
into
think
this and
anybody
do
can
this.
call it.
Anybody can call the Ethics Commission and file a complaint.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with Seth and Karen too. I think all the mechanisms are in place. I think this is a little draconian, and I think use the mechanisms in place. I don't think we have to go above and beyond, but as I say, I think it is draconian and it
Maybe on the boards committee commission page, we can say ethics phone number or link to the
Yeah.
ethics.
I think we said
Well,
that,
again,
didn't
and
we?
I was going to beef up the application form in a way that I think is appropriate to better inform people as to the law and their obligations, and maybe even provide a link that they can, depending on how they get this.
But the application isn't really the place to do it. We just heard from Ann Quirk that when they come to be sworn in, that's when they do the training.
That's right.
So they don't know what they were
Yeah.
signing. They have no knowledge. It's a backwards way to approach it. It's
It
No,
should
just-
be-
I
it
do
should be
think,
beforehand,
I
before
do
they
think
get the
beefing
position.
up the application is useful to everyone. It's, hey, before you even
It's
apply,
information.
you should understand that you're gonna be subject to this law.
But they don't have
Here's-
to do the training before they
You don't have to do
apply.
the training, but here's how you find out about it.
All right.
And we could even attach
That's
the
okay.
summary, we can figure out how to make the education part more robust up front before they actually submit their application, or as they're contemplating doing that. And I think that would be very useful.
That would be useful.
And, I'm happy to provide, better language to do that.
I just think maybe I'm the only one who thinks that violation of this includes consequences. And it should be told that, not consequence, not personal, we're not gonna send you to jail. But if you're doing something that's in your personal, familial, or financial interest, that has consequences, that you cannot be a member of a committee.
I've called ethics before.
I have a question. If that was happening, and say a resident or a counselor or somebody on the committee or however it got brought to the attention, and they go to the ethics, and the investigation is that when we say that the council has the right to an investigation, are we talking about an internal town investigation, or are we talking about an ethics investigation? Are those two things the same?
They're two different things, no. So if you want to file a complaint with the State Ethics Commission, you call them up and you say, I want to file a complaint. And they put you in touch with an investigator. And then they take all the information from you and then they investigate. You could submit a complaint in writing, and you could say, I'm filing a complaint against so-and-so, here's what they did. And then they will follow up and investigate. That's what the Ethics
And
Commission
at
does.
the end of that investigation, let's just say we found that the person,
Not they, we're still.
the ethics board found out that John Smith was unethical in his actions. I don't mean to say-
Violated the law.
Violated the law, thank you, that's what he violated the law. Does the town get report back because it
No.
relates to the board, committee, or commission?
No, they will not publicly disclose what they have decided unless they take public action, which is prosecuting someone or entering into a settlement agreement, or in some cases issuing what they call a public education letter, where they basically say, this is an issue that we think is of use to a lot of people to really understand, so we're going to basically tell you that we think you violated the law, tell you what you did wrong, and do it all publicly. We're not gonna do anything else to you, but we're gonna do it publicly. And I think they've started to use public education letters a little bit more. But again, for the most part, they will resolve it privately with a private letter saying either we don't think you did anything, or we're not aware of whatever, or we do think you may have violated. And I think that's the way they would say it, because the investigators don't make that final decision. For you to be found to have violated the law, the Ethics Commission, the board, the 5-member board, has to meet and decide this in a public forum, through a trial. That's what they do. They have trials, and they don't have a lot of them, and they do resolve certain things through settlement agreements to avoid having to go to trial, and those are public. They call them disposition agreements. But for the most part, it's handled privately, because everything Complaints that are submitted to them are confidential, advice that they give is confidential, and unless they are resolving a matter publicly, it's going to stay confidential. So that's the Ethics Commission, and anyone can submit a complaint, and they will review it and investigate it. Within the town, if the council wants to investigate something, there is a mechanism in the charter and in the rules, and we've cleaned it up a little bit, but it's still there and it's still robust, for the council to do that. And part of the concern that I have is without doing that, you just have, just you and me, we're sitting here talking, we don't agree, right, on a lot of this. So you would need a process where the council as a body decides what they think happened. It can't be you, it can't really be me, right? I mean, when things come to me, I try to work to have them get in touch with ethics or have them file whatever disclosures they might be a little late in filing, or figure out if something needs to be done over again because there is that possibility that, something may have been affected. I try to work with the person to fix what happened if something went wrong. But if it's something that I thought was highly egregious, I would talk to the town manager, I would talk to the council president, I would say, hey, this is terrible. I really haven't had that, and I know we don't necessarily agree on this, but if the council were going to say, hey, we think you violated the law, you've got to have a real process for getting to that decision. It can't be your opinion, it can't be, someone else's opinion, it would have to be through a process.
John, did you follow a process with any of these people?
Having said that, I'm gonna talk about a case, but I'm not talking about anything
Please don't.
but it was public knowledge by a number of the public prior to a decision in one of our boards that you were contacted that this person who was the chair of that commission had a direct conflict of interest. From what I understand, you talked to that person. That person said they were going to recuse, but went through the final meeting and ran 2 days worth of meetings, or 2 different meetings on an issue, and then only recused at the very end of the second day and was angry at the fact that people had asked him to recuse when his conflict was blatant and obvious. So you had talked to the person violated that maybe, I don't know what came out of that, but he went ahead and did what he wanted to do. And that was sent to the council. Then it had to be redone because we pointed out that what was written by an underling, the vice chair, was actually a copy of his own words in that last meeting. So it had to be redone. You remember the case. I'm not gonna bring up, but I'm saying, how do you do something
My
contemporaneously?
understanding of those facts are somewhat different, and so I don't want to debate them with you in this forum. I'm happy to talk to you privately.
Yeah.
So that is not my understanding, and there are significant differences. And at the end of the day, when something was brought to my attention very late in the day, that something that should not have happened, I had the whole process redone.
I remember that.
Yeah, I know.
But you wouldn't have had to have done that if you would have
I know.
seen
I'm
the
very
evidence that was
uncomfortable with
in,
this
that was
conversation
in
in
public.
this setting, John.
Well, we're not talking about a specific thing.
I know, but people.
What
do
we're,
figure.
Karen, what we're getting to is that there have been violations. There have been 3 that I know of that have been the people knew what they were doing. And then at the end, they did, I put my little letter in and everything's fine. And I think we should be able to contemporaneously deal with these things as they happen and not wait for the ethics committee 6 months after the policy has been worked on by a committee and passed on to.
You don't have to wait for the ethics commission if you want to follow a process within the town. What I'm saying though is, if you're going to remove people, you need to have a process. It can't be, because right now, my recollection of what happened is different than what you just said. And my conclusions are somewhat different. And that doesn't really matter because it's not up to me and it's not up to you. It should be up to the council as a body if you're going to remove someone from a board, and it should be after a process where you have met with that person and heard from them and told them what you think happened and have a full investigation. And in most cases, including that one, I don't think it was warranted.
I totally
I
disagree.
know that, but I don't wanna
Okay.
really debate.
And you're a lawyer, you have your
So
opinion.
how about we
Point of order.
let Karen come up with a
Come up with
more
something.
robust application and take a look at that,
Yeah,
That sounds like
and
a
move on to
solution.
something else.
I'm just wondering also if we wanna have 2 periodic times in the year where we just remind boards, committees, and commissions about, just to remind you that ethics, can change over time, just to remind you, because people get put on a board for 3 years and the training's every 2 years, and you kind of forget, because you're like rolling along. I mean, maybe we just need to twice a year just reread in the boards, committees, and commissions, just to remind you about it.
And I'll tell you, shortly, maybe not shortly, but after I joined the town, at one point, I said, we should have the Ethics Commission come in, because they have an education division. They have someone who comes in and does training, that's their job. And in this case, he's about to retire, but he lives in Marston's Mill, so like, we couldn't be more convenient. But in any event, we scheduled it, we scheduled certain sessions for staff and certain sessions for board members, and almost no board members attended. And so that's a problem, because I think that's a very useful, having someone come in and do that training is really very useful. You can ask questions, it's different than the training program, because there are nuances that you can't capture in a training program, but where you can ask. And so maybe, we should really think about beefing up the training that we provide to, to our board members, to staff as well, but to our board members. Staff, we're able to make.
now after beefing that up, we beef up enforcement, because we haven't been enforcing. Seth, you had something to say?
I just want to say, I think of this as being, familiar with the term tempest in a teacup. That we have 44 boards, committees, and commissions, right? Is that the current number? If we eliminated some, 43, whatever, it doesn't matter. Tempest in a teacup, 44 boards, committees, and commissions with hundreds of different members, right? And they have hundreds of meetings a year, they make hundreds of different decisions, regulatory, advisory, whatever. And what are we even talking about? How many of them do we think are nefarious in their making? You may have a couple of examples, which I'm sure, then that's fine, and I don't want to talk about them, really. I'm sure that we've talked about them, and I don't know. But when we really think about it, is this even an issue? We're going to sit here and talk about it for an hour or whatever. It hasn't been quite an hour. I understand why you want to, that's fine. But in reality, you don't legislate for an outlier possibility of something that could maybe happen someday to somebody at some point. You use the what is available to you to make it through the law of averages to make the best process possible for what is the average occurrence that's going to happen. Then you have an extremity where there's bad actors, and then there's a thing, and then, you know what I mean? But really, in reality, let's be honest with ourselves here, that the vast majority of what's going on, is just fine. And these are good people who are volunteering their time and their expertise in order to help us run the town. There may be some crumb bums, but we have a mechanism for that. And I know you have your examples, and I know that you disagree with Karen, and that's all well and good, but I think that's an important thing to also remember, to keep in perspective, and I think that we should move on to the next thing.
And if I could just add one last thing to that, I'll be real quick, is just, there's a reason why there's an entire state agency that implements and advises on the ethics laws, because it's complicated. And as clear as it may seem to you, it really isn't to a lot of people, and I know that for an absolute fact. And that's why you have an entire state agency, and this is all they do. And because it's not obvious, they could just hand out handouts. They don't do that. They have a very robust agency with an entire legal division. They have an enforcement division, but they have an education division, and then they have a legal division. And the education division does training, and the legal division takes any call and advises people on how to comply with the law, as long as it's on a going forward basis and not on what they've already done. So it is not intuitive, as obvious as it may seem to you. I have done this for years and years and years, and I'm telling you, it is not. That's all I'm gonna say.
Okay, well, I will disagree with Seth a little bit here. We're not talking about labeling everybody a crumb bum, but there are a small number of incidents that are important to policy that's been passed here or been adjudicated here that have been a problem. Okay, so we need to focus on the ones who are a problem, not everybody. Okay, I'm not asking that. okay? You are right. Of all the people we have, there's a very few small examples. But those small examples have been pivotal in a number of issues in the last 3 or 4 years, okay? And that's what I want to stop against, to quit happening, and see that it quit happening. So I'll leave it at that. We'll see what you come up with. But I'd like to see teeth in some of this for those few that would do this
Well,
purposely.
just to be clear, what I'm
I know
going
what you're
to
saying.
draft for the application is not gonna have teeth the way you're saying it. It's going to be hopefully more helpful in letting people know upfront how this whole framework works.
Go ahead.
Quick question. Is there a way someone who's not yet appointed to board, committee, commission can take the ethics test in advance of applying? Say, oh, wonder if this is for me.
I don't know if they can do it. I don't know if they can log into the system without, I don't know the answer to
Yeah,
that.
because that would be part of education.
But they can get, the Ethics Commission, I'm trying to think if they have
Because
a
when I've
guide.
taken the test, I was like, how did I get that question wrong?
Yeah.
I'm sorry to say. I thought, I'm being forthright and,
Yeah, I don't know,
Because there
if-
are
I
those
don't know if you
nuances.
can get into the system without getting some
Sure.
assigned thing through your, I'm just not sure about that.
okay.
But there are materials that you can certainly look at ahead of time, and so that's what I'm gonna focus on, I think, is what
Those
people
quizzes
can
are
read.
tricky.
Yeah, and as you and I just talked about recently, they changed the program. So the training program, they've upgraded it, they've made it more robust, it's longer, but I think they actually did a very good job with it. And it takes time. The first one you could have just whipped through, and there are ways to do it quickly. This one you really have to go through it. So I think they did a nice job with that. But I don't think people can do it if they're not, but I'm not positive about that. But I'll look at what I can do with the application.
And I will say that if anybody wants to sit down and talk to some of these and see whether my opinion on these couple of issues or my outlook on them actually is what's being portrayed here. Because I think some of you, if you knew the facts of some of these, a couple of things that I've dealt with that we've seen here, would maybe have a different opinion about this conversation and how it went through. Because these weren't, these were egregious examples. So, and allowed to pass.
Maybe the fact that we're having
Yes.
a more, fruitful discussion will help us as counselors in the future if something comes up.
Yeah.
Be in a better position to ask the questions ahead of time. And we've had the conversation, and it sounds like if there was some history there, that maybe that will inform our future. And maybe we shouldn't let it totally define us, but it be a footnote in the future that we're looking at if something happens again, if it were to arise. And I mean,
Something will happen again.
no, I know, but I
That's
mean,
the way of the world.
yeah, but I'm just saying, again, as Councilor Burdick says, it's an outlier rather than an everyday occurrence, and it might not happen for everybody long.
Well, can I bring up one issue before Ann? Ann looks like she's gathering her papers.
Well, I don't know if I really do. Go right ahead.
Is that okay, John, or do you?
Please.
Yeah, no, it's something we had discussed, having to do with the airport commission, and Allison, I sent you a number of things, I don't know if you've looked through those. And Ann, I talked to you, you found the ballot questions, the old ones, I don't know if you
I'm not
care.
really, I know there's been an issue, but I'm not really up to speed.
That, if you could just remind us again of the schedule, when you would need something, I guess, voted from the town council, can you back us up to get us to the ballot if we did, because this, what we had talked about would require a voter on the charter. It's not like a charter commission, but it's an individual piece that would require the voters to vote on it.
Correct. So our
Change to the charter.
A change to the charter, yes.
charter. And that would be for the November election, which is
Right.
November the 4th. And I would be having the nomination papers are due back to me by the 19th of September, which means you would have had to have voted on this, and Karen would have had to have the chance to look at the verbiage that's going to go on the ballot in the fall, in the summer, because you only have July and August, and then
Oh, yeah.
September is going to be too late because I have to get that.
So we need to really target July, I think, to give, the language is very simple.
What do we,
To have the airport commission report to the town manager. or not the airport, I'm sorry, the airport manager be a department head on the same level as all the other department heads and report to the town manager.
So you would abolish the airport commission?
No, they'd be advisory rather than controlling.
But Allison was gonna look into it, right?
It's been on the ballot before.
Yeah, I do understand that.
I think twice before.
That was it, sorry, I didn't say it right, but that, to make the airport manager a department head and have them report to the town manager.
Okay. I don't have any thoughts on this just yet.
No, of course not, no, I just wanted to make sure while Ann is here,
Yes, it's just to make sure that
So it
if
sounds
that's
like-
gonna happen this year,
July meeting, it would have to,
I just need it at the latest, the August meeting, so we can get it in.
does it need 2 reads?
Changing something in the
I
charter?
would say yes.
Yeah, I would say yes.
So the August meeting would be the absolute last.
Mhm.
There's also publication that has to take place too.
Correct, yep.
And when it was brought forward 2 other times, how far apart in time were those 2 attempts?
I wanna say it was 1992 or 97, no, I can't, and then 2002, I think, was the second one. So it was a gap.
But not a 20-year gap.
No,
What was the vote?
Now it's
Or the
20
votes?
I can look it up, it didn't pass.
No, I got that.
It didn't pass. I'd have to go back and see if I can find the actual, actually, I could look it up, it'll be in the annual town reports.
Okay, yeah, I'm curious.
that
Okay.
would be interesting, yeah.
Can you share that with us as well? Just, can you share that with us as well?
I would be
Just
happy
Out of
to.
curiosity.
I would
Since
be
we
happy
asked.
to.
Did the committee ask her, I left the room to go check something coming. Did they ask you about the training that we did years ago?
With Ruthie?
Yeah,
Oh, no, we
you
didn't.
guys had questions about that the last time that I.
Right, about onboarding new counselors? Is that what you're doing?
No, no, it wasn't onboarding for councils, it was boards, committees, and commissions. On what they do with their agenda, who it gets to, what happens with the meeting minutes.
Open meeting law was a huge part of it.
Yeah.
Because of the changes, so the changes, I wanna say it was at least 10 years ago, probably longer than that. There've been so many changes in open meeting law and things like that, so, Ruthie and I did a show and tell, and we had slides and, you know.
I did an open meeting law training
And
when I
you did.
started.
Yes, you did.
Yeah, so that was like 5 years ago,
Yes, you did.
5.5.
And how long was the training that you did?
When I did it with Ruthie, probably an hour, between the 2 of us. But maximum, she spent most of the time on the exceptions to the rule.
I think last time we talked a lot about what the Inspector General
Like right after I
offers
started.
as a guide. And we talked about maybe including that into the application package for someone to be able to review what it, or maybe part of this package where we're having them sign these things and then these are helpful materials for you to understand where you're posting the agenda, or who you're sending the agenda to. But we were going to talk about having a similar guide. Who mentioned, somebody mentioned, I forget which counselor mentioned
So
that there was
there's
the
a
Inspector
current-
General.
Yeah, and there's a current boards, committees, and commissions
That we worked
guide,
on,
which
yeah.
actually I emailed Lynn yesterday, because she and I and Jim Kupfer are supposed to be updating that. And we had met a couple of times, and then, there was a gap of time, and I emailed them yesterday, I have to circle back, but I'm like, who's doing what? Like, where did we leave this? So there is work that's going to be done on that, and, maybe,
Right.
I guess it would be helpful to know what some of your specific issues might be, so we can make sure, like, in the next draft, that we address them if it's not already addressed in there.
And
But
that's the 10-page handbook.
I don't know.
Is that what you're talking about?
I don't know how many pages, but,
Okay.
because, again, after I started, I think planning had put together the guidebook, and I
Right.
reviewed it and made a bunch of changes, and, that was a little while ago. So,
We were handing it out along with these things until it was decided that it was really needed to be updated, and so we started handing it out.
yeah, so.
Okay.
Do you wanna send that to us so we can look at it and then give you any suggestions that we think?
Yeah, you could do that.
Please, thank you.
Sure.
So there'd be a training handbook for any new committee members, or not, you're not talking about the council, you're talking about the.
This is committee members. This was how to, I mean,
Yeah,
at
how
one
things
point,
work.
how do you, when you're in the meeting, how do you say you want to put a motion forward?
Yeah.
What's necessary? We did all of that. We did all different pieces to it.
Right.
Just for committee members.
Parliamentary rules and that kind of stuff, okay. Moving on, I want to have somebody to put forward an approval of the minutes on March 31st.
So
Yeah.
moved?
Second,
Okay, we move in a second. Any comments on the meeting minutes?
Thank you, Aaron.
Seeing none, all in favor of accepting the minutes of March 31st, 2025, say yes.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ann. And discuss next meeting
I
dates.
just have a
Oh,
question.
wait,
This
that's
is
not all we're
highlighted.
discussing today?
Excuse me?
Is that all we're discussing today?
No, we can do whatever you want.
Well, I don't know.
I just have a question, why these are highlighted?
The liaison list that was handed out,
Yes.
those that are highlighted, they don't have liaisons.
Thank you. I was like,
It's
I
in your-
missed something.
All I got were these.
I'm sorry.
I never took my thing. Where was my thing?
It's-
Did you make me a
I
packet?
did, it's down with Attorney Nover,
And will you hand me that?
and I'll give you one.
Do you have that
It should be done.
one? Can I have one of those?
You can have both of
Thank you very much.
Seth, are you sure it's not on the last page?
This was just 3 agendas that Ann handed to me.
I'm sorry,
Thank you.
so sorry.
No,
No, I just
There it
think we
Thank you.
should make a little more progress. I mean,
Okay.
at the last meeting, you discussed on it, there was a general discussion about reaching out to the liaisons, and we have these 4 without liaisons, to ask questions about the functionality of each one of the committees, and we were gonna give you questions.
Did you do that, Counselor Lucky?
I did not.
Chris
Did you do that?
I did.
See?
She did.
Okay. I just wondered, what did you get? Are we at that point where we're ready to send some questions out, or?
Well, we do have a number of questions. The question is, I see this as sort of how we want to go about it, because this is going to be a number of committee heads. I don't know how many there are.
44.
44, and maybe we ought to go with a strategy first and decide. I was going to ask possibly Mark Ells to put out a notice to committee heads if they wanted to discuss any issues they had, to come to a meeting here and discuss those and about how we can make those things better, if possible, or change things. Is that something that,
That's a good idea.
yeah,
I think,
instead of going to every single one?
yeah, I think we had talked about early on about maybe separating it, like by like groups of committees,
Yeah.
like on
Yeah.
this next meeting, we give them heads up, say, if you have particular issues you wanna bring forward, these following committees are gonna have an opportunity to speak on this meeting, and then we have that one, and then we talk about our next date and do the same thing, that way it's not crazy, it's organized,
Right.
but we get that would probably be, maybe do like 10 at a time, or 5, I don't know, whatever you wanna do, but, you know, it'll take a while, but at least you're getting everybody in if they have a question or issue or concern.
I think the question we need to look at is what what information do we want to glean from this process? I don't know, and will committee members who are just a regular committee member who think their committee is not doing well or whatever, will they actually come forward? I mean, which is why maybe soliciting people anonymously, they could respond, the town manager or the town, our town council administrator could take that information and remove the person's name if they want to remain anonymous to provide information, because there might be people in boards, committees, and commissions who don't feel that, coming forward would be good for them, or good,
Like we don't like our chair, or something like that.
yeah, like the chair doesn't allow an open forum, and they're very controlling, I don't know,
Past experience, when surveys like this have gone out to committee members, they're very reluctant to return them.
yeah, so I guess that's my point, is like, then we make space on a meeting for 10 groups to show up, and kind of like the training, only one person shows up, so.
Seth?
Oh, I'm just curious. Well, so I understand that and all. What was the intention? What was Felicia's intention when she decided to
I
create
guess
this
that's
particular?
what I'm trying to get at.
Do you know what I mean?
Aren't we
Like, what
trying
was
to
the?
aren't we trying to get at the root of how effective and how value-added are these committees?
Yes. Is
Right,
that what
and
you
it was
think
like
she
you,
meant? Is
it
that
was
what
like
the
you had
goal?
said
Part of what-
before,
I think a
Councilor
big part-
Luckey, when you said, what value does the Human
Yes.
Services, they've been meeting for 7 years, and they've
completely
brought
at sea.
nothing forward
They
to the
brought
town
nothing
council.
forward.
My understanding of Counselor Penn's, motivation was, we have a million committees, do we need them
Do
all?
we need them? That's what I'm saying, we really need to make some hard decisions, it's why,
So rather than asking them whether they think they
Right.
should get the chop, do you say,
Because a lot of these were created when we did not have the staff to do the work.
and
It
that's
needed to
what,
be done. Now that there's staff, a lot of these, like the water quality, they've got the CWMP, they've got Amber doing everything with water quality. There's no need to have a water quality group because it's being handled at the DPW.
well, that's I think that's what Cynthia said is exactly to the point, is that these committees, by far and large, they provide no value to me as a town councilor. Not one of them has provided me, maybe the CFAC does, in terms of some of their analysis when we're doing that. And that's why I think the Human Services struggles, because there is no staff, to your
Right,
point.
because there's
So
a,
they have no one to plug into.
right, there's a county level human services over at the county that they should,
But they're not plugged in.
right.
So I just think we really need to look at all of these. I mean, the regulatory ones, yeah, those are obvious, and maybe we can tweak in terms of those, but some of these others,
I would probably start with the non-regulatory.
right, I would start with the non-regulatory and just see,
Because those are the ones you can do something with, or
Right.
get rid of.
yeah.
To your point, Counselor Burdick, I prompted Counselor Penn to start this committee because I knew that there were some stale committees. And when I was on appointments, I noticed that we were on the website advertising that we were looking for members to the Cable Television Advisory Committee.
Right.
And alphabetically, it was first on what was available. And I was like, we don't want to be soliciting members because they haven't met. So I just said, we need to retire these, not just, and what she did is request that they get off the town's website, but we never formally took a vote to retire that committee. So even though they were absent from the website, they weren't absent from our code. So those were the committees that were easy pickings that we already discussed.
Yes.
so that was the impetus behind it? So
Well,
then did we
because
accomplish our mission?
PEG Access took over cable TV, so there was no reason.
Yeah, so
That's
are
No,
why
we
I
no,
was
but what
saying a
Council
lot of
Burdick
these-
is saying, we've done that.
So we're
We've
done.
sunsetted
Well,
half a
that's what I'm
dozen,
saying.
check,
Yes.
can we
So-
sunset this committee and be done, is
But
what you're
that's what, well,
asking?
more or less, I
Well,
guess.
I think
because
if you're
what we-
keeping certain committees, you might wanna then look to see, do they do what you need them to do? Do you need to make changes to their mission or add some stuff or,
Combine them.
yeah, cause I think it's the purpose and functionality, so.
So those were the easy ones, the ones that haven't been meeting. So now we do need to do a little more forensic work to say, okay, are there others that are underperforming? Or do we need to refine their purpose, look at the code and just clean it up?
Yeah, I mean, I understand that, but from a cost-benefit analysis, do we have any feeling for, we're talking non-regulatory bodies, what budget impact does the existence of the Human Services Committee have?
Well, I think,
Does
I
anybody-
mean, I think the
do you know what I
reality
mean?
is that we have a lot of committees that are having trouble finding, video time.
Yes.
So that's an impact. We
Staff
have
support.
Cindy's time,
Every
we
committee
have,
needs staff support.
we have staff support time, we
Right.
have
So
counselors'
there's a
time,
number that has
we
to
have-
be applied to that, and
we have
what is it?
people's time, we have paper that we have to produce, we have the tentacles of what those committees in theory could do might require legal's time. And then we have.
And then they all have to create minutes, they all have to do all the stuff you have to do as a committee.
I mean, as innocuous as it seems that the Human Services maybe isn't doing anything for us, so it's just fine to let them trudge along. The problem is it is kind of sucking up
Right,
time.
but that's what I mean. I wasn't saying it well, I was kind of saying it that way, but what I really am trying to say is that it's obvious that they have some financial impact, but what is it? But then I'm asking that honestly. So if you could, somebody should break down, so what does it cost us to operate it? Because you can't do a cost benefit, you can't say of what benefit is this if you don't know how much it costs you.
But what also, you have to look at what benefit, regardless
Exactly,
of
but
cost.
you gotta have one or
Do
both
you
of
need that
those,
committee?
one or
Like,
both of
I would
those
say the
numbers.
housing committee adds no value whatsoever.
Right.
None, zero.
I can tell you that IT only tapes or video live regulatory boards. They do not do the advisory, they don't have the staff. There's not enough staff to do
Again,
advisory.
But
I
again, the
just
whole
think
point
we-
is like,
we
we
have to go
have
for the
actual
value
committees who, in theory, might actually have value if we recorded it, like the Human Services has some,
They have
great
no value.
people.
They have no value.
okay, wait one second, let me
Okay,
finish my
okay.
thought. I thought I heard you say at some point that there were actually people that came and spoke to the committee to educate about certain issues, and that was of value, but it's never recorded, so if you don't go to the meeting, you don't know that
It's of no
John.
value to the town if we do not have a human services department. We have no ability to impact what those entities are doing. It's nice information, but why do we care if we have no ability to engage with them in any way?
Well, we definitely don't have any ability to engage with them if we don't have it recorded and you can't go back and look at it. I guess it's kind of what I'm saying at the beginning, I can't even go back and see what the Human Services did.
What would
Last
you do, well,
month.
what would you do with that information?
I don't know, Betty, but my point is that if I don't know the information, I definitely can't do anything. So access to information, the whole point of
Yeah,
of what we're doing is to have access to information. I'm not even saying we should keep the committee, I'm just saying,
yeah.
like,
No, I just think we need to take a much harder look and, I think start with the advisory ones and really, again, housing.
well, you've asked the question, so what do you propose, Councilor Lucky?
I
'Cause
wanna
you asked
look
it
at-
last meeting, and the goal was everybody was supposed to submit questions, and I think I'm the only one that submitted questions. So you've asked the question now twice, I guess I'm kind of asking you to maybe go forward with some suggestions
I'd like to
rather
do
than
a
just
deep
asking
dive
the
into
question.
each one of these ones that are not regulatory.
And
I
how
mean-
would you propose we do that?
We could talk to the liaison to the committee, and then we could talk
Maybe-
to,
Oh, sorry. I don't want to interrupt. If we all came up with, if we each came up with a list in descending order of what ones we thought independently that should be eliminated, and then we could see where where those choices are in common, and then we could pick 3 or 4 committees and then really look at them, rather than go at it scattershot and say, so we can come up with some form of ranking so if we want to look at it that way, then we should rank them. We could talk about that right now, or we could go off and make a list and then come back with a list of what we think are the or descending order, what's the most valuable or least valuable to the most valuable. And then we pick those top 5 and then we say, okay, so these are the ones that we're gonna zero in on, and then we can go out and say, maybe then we ask questions or whatever, or even if that's necessary, or we can have a discussion about it and come to an intellectual consensus that we don't need that committee. Do you know what I mean? Maybe we should start that way. Begin by saying, which of us think which ones are the obvious ones that need to go, focus on those, move them along, and
well, I
then,
think wasn't that where the
Is that what you were
questions were
just
gonna
saying?
go to the liaisons? I thought the questions were going to the
I
liaisons.
thought they were gonna go to the chairs.
I thought they were going to chairs.
Okay. Then
the
that's
chairs
what
are
I said.
automatically gonna say their committees are just fine and they
Yeah.
like them.
Yeah.
They wanna continue to do it. I mean, because
Well,
there's a
no, but I think
volunteerism thing too
Cheryl
that goes on
Powell
with
has
this.
quite openly said her committee is ineffective.
The Human
Yeah.
Services
And
Committee?
she's
Yes.
yeah, so, and I think there are other people on the committee that also feel the
Well,
same.
remember that nice guy we appointed to the Human Services Committee
2
just
days ago.
recently? Yeah. But you know what I mean, as Betty
Poor
says.
guy.
So maybe the discussion also, but he's a very interesting fellow, he's very,
Patrick
he's got a good story, he's
Patrick,
very
yeah.
involved.
He's
That's the kind of
fantastic.
person that we need to be involved.
No, I know, but the
It's our
question is
fault that we don't have human services, so maybe the discussion should be how do we then facilitate or make reasonable the Human Services
Make it more
Committee?
effective.
Yeah, and the
Yeah,
people in the
like,
committees
rather than
might have that,
destroy
because
it.
we don't have that.
So we could then, not in this committee necessarily, but in whatever committee that is appropriate, we got a million committees, but, or even just one of us could make an agenda item and start the research and to, how do we hire a human resources liaison, or what, does it go in the planning department, what do we,
Yeah,
that's one way
I
to
think
look at
that's a
it too,
basic
like-
question, that if we don't have a staff entity, then a committee becomes
Yeah,
very
obsolete.
ineffective very quickly, because they have nowhere to plug in.
Right, and so does
It's
it mean
like,
we
that's why
get
the
rid of it?
housing committee, who are they plugging into?
Right, we don't have a housing specialist still, right?
We used
In
to have the
planning.
housing specialist, used to go to the housing committee and kind of sort of run it, But we haven't had that for how many years now? 3 years?
Sometimes all you need is somebody to book a room and post the agenda, post minutes. So sometimes
Cory
might not
Pacheco does it now for housing.
Yeah.
But I
to
think the question is, do you wanna get rid of a committee
Yeah.
or do you wanna beef it up?
Like,
Yeah,
is
you're
the
right.
housing committee, they meet however, they meet the third Tuesday of the month, and when they do, and the minutes come out, then what? Like, where's that information
Right, that's
going?
where's that information
If we're not
going?
watching the meeting, then, like, of what value? So I guess that's the functionality. What's its function, and is it functioning for us as town council members to help in the town space do what we need to do related to housing?
But you also may wanna put something in place where chairs of committees make periodic reports to the council, you know, cause you
it's in the
have.
code that they should.
Yeah, but even at that, if they come and they say, yep, we had 4 meetings and we talked about housing. Again, it's
Well,
like.
presumably they would say something more than that.
I know, but
Well-
the question is like, they're developing and they're taking this time to do this committee thing, and then like, where does that, like, where does that go? What does that do? Is to Council Lumpkin's
Well, why
point.
don't we kludge together what John had said and what Seth just said, these questions, that you're the only one who participated in that, and then his, that we kind of look at these, those of us who are liaisons. Have you been to a housing committee recently, or?
I have.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, what's
and
your,
It's disorganized. And I also don't get a lot of the notices that they're meeting. I should be going on the website, but I figure as liaison, I'd be in the loop.
You're the liaison, you're not getting the notices?
No. Same with the Board of Health. You know,
You should talk to the chairs.
yeah,
Well, health would have staff support,
yeah.
so that should be copied through that.
It's just a question. Cynthia, what we have here are only partial of the committees. What is on this sheet?
Those are the ones that the town council appoints to.
Points to, okay. So
yeah, we
we're-
don't have Mr. Ells's committees.
Correct.
Okay, so
And we
this is what
don't
we're working
appoint
on.
to the school committee,
No,
but, I mean, it's on here anyway, but just,
it's on there only because you have a liaison to it.
and I don't think we do trust fund advisory committee.
Wait, which one?
Trust
Oh,
fund
any.
advisory committee,
Yeah,
I
I
do
think
not,
they all, well,
I think that's a town
I
manager.
think it's town manager, but I'm not,
We appoint to it and write the letters, but
oh, the
He-
council appoints.
yeah,
The trust fund advisory committee is under the appointments committee?
And the Old
Just hasn't
Kings
come out.
Highway, those people are
That's
elected,
elected.
and that's mandated by the state.
correct.
Which one?
That's
Old
elected.
Kings Highway, the
Yes,
middle one
that's
on the
elected.
bottom.
Yep, yep.
Their names are on ballots.
So do we have the list of, go ahead, Councilor Burdick, sorry.
Oh, I don't know, I like to raise my hand, I know that
No, I know, I totally
maybe
was
this
just
committee,
going on.
but.
I'm
but
realizing
I
how
talk
busy
over
we write the
people.
letters.
No, that's all right, I know.
Councilor Crowe, run this
Yeah,
committee.
I just don't wanna talk over anybody, but anyway.
As I was doing?
Yeah, no. But so, I think that there is also, and I know it may be, I always am going after people for their Pollyanna-ish thinking,
That'd be
but
awesome.
that also, this represents a certain, this is civic involvement. You know what I mean? This is volunteerism. We have a lot of elderly people. We have a lot of people who want to get involved. We have a lot of, this to me represents town spirit. This is also a pipeline for other committees. This is something where people can go out and have a place to go and do and people to talk to and something to get involved in and feel good about what they're doing in their town and their community and whatever. And as a business owner, I am always sensitive to the idea of what things cost and what you're going to invest in or your return on your investment and whatever. And that's why I said it before about what does it really cost us? And I'd be interested to know if any of you guys want to find that and send it to me. If you could, you'd have to do some extrapolating, but I'm sure that the smart somebody like in the town manager's office could figure it out or
The only
finance.
thing it would cost, I would think, would be IT taping it and having somebody here on an hourly basis. Other than that,
Yes,
it's a public building, so they don't
somebody-
pay for the room.
Come up with a number. But so like for what it is, you know, government has to do things that are not necessarily profitable, right? Because government doesn't operate at a profit, in spite of what you may have heard on the news lately. But there's not supposed to be a profit motive. That we do things for the good of the community and the good of the people that live in the community, whatever form that takes. And so though I can understand from an infrastructure standpoint and trying to streamline the process and have things be as functional and as efficient as they can be, these also represent a lot of, and I'm not talking about regulatory boards so much, we're making, concrete decisions for people and what they're doing and how the town operates. But, something for people to do, feel good, get involved, be a part of the town and be a part of their municipal life. Do we want to think about it necessarily from a strictly black and white? Is this effective? Is it ineffective? And based on what return on investment we're looking for, and not that we are. Do you see what I mean by that? And so that's just me, one way of looking at it. It doesn't mean that that we shouldn't eliminate some of these, but I'm just thinking of it from that perspective as well. Because I know that there's probably a lot of people who look forward to going to these meetings, and we have a lot of elderly people and things of that. You know what I mean? All different stuff. So that's just food for thought.
I mean, I agree with that line of thinking, except for that, I think we then have to go beyond, it's nice to have a social club. The question is how can these committees, if we are gonna have them, actually help us and guide us in the
Right,
town?
we can
And
pick.
maybe
And say which
maybe
ones.
the housing committee will never be able to help and guide us, and we decide to keep it because we like having a social club for people who want to talk about housing. But the question also is if we examine this committee and
That just
provided.
sounds wrong.
I know.
People have all
To the
kinds of
extreme of what he's saying, I guess to the extreme of Councilor Burdick's line of thinking, is like,
I know, but,
we gotta
you
have
know.
a place for people to come and socialize, but my point being is there something we could do as a
Right, to make
town
it more
to
effective.
actually make this work
And
for
that's
us?
the flip side.
If we're spending time, money, and effort on it, instead of just being a social club, it actually functions to
Right,
help.
either get
make
rid of
decisions,
something or
yeah.
figure out how to make it
Yeah,
work.
like,
Yeah, that's
why
what-
didn't that housing committee be the ad hoc
Right,
housing
housing.
committee? Why, I mean,
I think you're gonna get more of a story of how the committees are operating if you talk to the staff that actually attend it.
I was just gonna say, like, we're talking about housing committee, if Corey is currently the housing specialist, maybe we talk to Corey and say, how have they been able to contribute to what you're doing as housing specialist?
yeah, exactly.
How else could you utilize them to assist you? I mean, are there things that he could use a
Suggest-
committee on? You know what I mean? So that might be helpful as well.
Yeah, because
Yeah, that's a nice way to look at it.
Review
I like
the
that.
effectiveness,
primarily
composition, functionality, and effectiveness. If the committee is ineffective because there's something in the town that's missing, like, I really think we should lean into human services, because we got problems when it comes to that sort of thing.
Probably wasn't.
But the committee's useless, as you say, as it is,
Yes,
because there's
I
nobody,
agree
nothing to
with
do.
you. I think we should have a human services
But we
department.
gotta figure
I
out
think
how to
that we
make it
don't
work.
is just ridiculous for a town this size and with the problems we have and all the NGOs and the issues, and we have the only homeless shelter on Cape Cod.
Right.
The thought that we don't have a human services department is, I think, just ludicrous. But that poor humans, again, I've been on the liaison on this for 2 years, more than 2 years, so it's torturous. And the people are tortured. And you talked about the new guy. They're all amazing, their background, but they're frustrated.
Right, 'cause they-
Why would they want to keep doing this when they've given no support? I mean, so if, I really want us to do a deep dive. Can you share your questions? Can we hear what you thought with the questions you sent to John, or?
John can send them out.
Can you send them back to me again?
Hopefully.
Yeah, I know.
I think we should pick
What do you mean
the
your
bottom
question?
five.
Can you,
Last time we
can
said,
you
what
include
kind of
them to
questions
me,
would we
'cause I
send to
didn't
the
see
chair
them
or the
either.
liaison to ask about how the committee's functioning now? Would there be recommendations for changes? What's working well, what's not working well?
But you know what, you should bring them to a meeting, and you should do it in a meeting,
Yeah.
not by email.
Yeah, oh, I see what you're
Well, I
saying.
thought you
Yes, Cindy said
we
you
could
send them
to
to her.
John and he would call.
they should go to me.
It should be done at a meeting.
Yeah, but you can't like
There's
talk
an
to Cindy and then
open
have
meeting
Cindy talk
violation.
to you on behalf of you, like it.
No, I thought the whole point was we were just gonna bring them together and we would talk about the questions. Like
I
we
would
were
come to I would,
independently
you could send them all to
brainstorming.
Cindy, and then I would come to a meeting with them,
To
and then
discuss them.
figure out what you wanna do with them, and then Cindy can put them together in
Yeah, I
whatever
thought that's-
document, but,
I didn't give them to Cindy, I thought that's what we were gonna do through John.
no, I know, but
So, yeah.
John's a member of the committee,
Yeah.
so I
Well,
just wanna
that's
be careful.
Well, I will say that I'm a little bit, even though I'm the chair of this committee, I'm a little bit, where do we put the pin? Where do we look at? Because we've got so many committees here, and many of them are fine committees, they work fine. But we've thrown a bunch of ideas out, but we need a strategy. And I need help
Well,
with this, it's a
let's-
strategy about who we invite here, what the reason we're inviting them. I think the staff was a good idea.
I love that, yes. I
Yeah.
think between staff and liaisons, the liaisons have been going,
And what
I don't know.
What about the chairs and any members that wanna come and
Yes,
speak.
I think, but I think it's starting, how do we start? I'm
How do
saying,
we
how do we
start?
start?
That's
I think
what
we
I'm
start
saying,
with the
'cause
staff.
I say
When it
narrow-
comes to staff, you should reach out to the department heads.
Create a list of
Not
which
the
ones you
staff.
wanna
You should
target.
reach out to the
Yeah.
department.
Department
That's what I
heads?
would say.
And if you want, like, Corey or somebody to come, you should reach out to Jim and say, this is what we'd like, and I would go through the department heads.
Okay, can John write that, or is that something through Cindy?
I
John can talk to people
certainly-
outside of this committee, I'm concerned about you all talking to each
Right.
other.
John, do you feel comfortable with that, talking to the department heads?
Well, I have no problem talking to the department heads, I just need, Cindy, what do you suggest? Any ideas on, or just go to the, all of the
Well,
department heads, talk to
this
them?
was done in the past when they looked at committees to dissolve them, probably about 9 years ago. When we looked at the agricultural commission and at that time, we called in the chairs and 2 or 3 members of the committees, and they all said their committee worked wonderfully.
They will, that's what I'm saying.
So this time, I'm saying if you go
Why wouldn't
to, if you go to the actual staff or the liaisons to the committee, you might get a different perspective, because I don't think anybody wants their committee gone, but if you're not,
And plus, they don't wanna come out and say
No.
something bad about something.
Right.
They raise your hand, just
No,
start
I'm just
talking.
sorry, but so, like, if you look at this list, you can already tell where the low-hanging fruit is, so we've got, really, and that's, I say that. in
Okay,
a
give
nice
us the
way.
list, Seth,
Give
and
us-
we're
No,
gonna
but really,
second.
because you have all the regulatory bodies, which you can't do anything about those, obviously. But so, we've got the Disability Commission, the Golf Course Committee, or Golf Course, is that what it's called? Golf Course Committee? Yeah,
I think it's a golf committee.
the Council on Aging, the Human Services Committee, Jane Esbaugh's already gone, right?
Yes.
Infrastructure and Energy, Open Space, and
Actually, I think open space though
that's
does
pretty much
bring forward
recreation.
properties.
Those are the ones
No,
that,
it doesn't.
it doesn't really do anything.
No, it
just
doesn't
makes
do anything.
recommendations about, like, they talk about conservation restrictions, they talk about, that kind of stuff, and they work with like BLT and places like that.
yeah, I think
but-
you'll find a lot of these committees too also work well, like the golf committee works very closely with the golf
Staff.
department.
Yeah, the guys who work over there,
Yeah,
but they're
they don't
advisory.
necessarily interact
But
with
do
the
they-
council.
Do they, again, we'd have to ask through,
Yeah.
recreation to the golf. What would happen if this committee wasn't there? I mean, couldn't you run the golf, I mean, people run golf courses without committees, I don't know.
I think it'll be also good so that you guys will get an idea of if you call in the staff or the liaisons to
Jane
these.
Eschbaugh is still in the code.
Cause we
Well,
haven't, at the council level, changed it.
But we had voted on a recommendation
That's
for it.
that's been the incentive for this committee.
That one thing we
Sorry,
voted on,
Jane.
we're done.
They voted on
housing
5 of
committee,
them
that
so
was the
far
other one.
recommended to
So there's however many that is.
So
Well,
one, two,
waterways, do we
three,
need
four,
waterways?
five,
Can't they
six.
just do their job?
They actually do. I do.
They have a regulatory thing.
No, they
for
don't.
waterways, don't
No,
they?
no.
Well, they recommend
Yeah,
all
but
the
they
shellfish.
They do a
The
lot,
shellfish-
right?
The Shellfish Committee.
No, but the
The
shellfish is
guy who
different
wanted
than,
to do, who
Waterways,
wanted to
here, I have
do
it up
weirs.
here.
the weirs, so that came out of waterways,
The
right?
Waterways Committee is an advisory committee of the town.
So why did he have to go to the waterways committee
Yeah.
to get weirs allowed if it's advisory?
Because actually, the town manager, to my understanding, actually looks to waterways to recommend or not.
why would he look to his department head?
He does as well, but I think, like, for example, I can speak more, I'm more familiar with the Shellfish Committee. It's got members who are recreational diggers, commercial diggers, harvesters, and others at large. And the town manager, they take votes to recommend to the town manager that certain actions. They review and interact with the Shellfish Constable on revising regulations. So they develop it, they have a back and forth, and the Shellfish
So we don't
Constable.
have
So,
staff?
so the point is,
Waterways
the Shellfish
Committee-
Committee has an actual function, which is to provide guidance, and it actually sounds like they're liaisoning with the people who make the regulations and fines and whatever related to their industry of
Yes.
shellfishing, versus Human Services, who doesn't liaison to anybody for anything, and
I
so
wanna
then
hear about-
hence it's a totally dysfunctional.
Waterways, I watched the Waterways Committee vote to revoke a guy's license.
And
How
then,
can they do that?
and once it was
They
voted, where
vote
does
to
it go to?
recommend.
They
And it
voted
goes
to
to the
recommend.
But you know, it's
It goes to the
interesting,
licensing board after that
but if you
vote?
look at authorities and responsibilities under the Waterways Committee, there are two main things. The Waterways Committee studies, plans, and makes recommendations regarding the development, protection, maintenance, and improvements of the foreshores, I don't know what that is, jetties, breakwaters, channels, wharves, bulkheads, docks, piers, slips, marinas, town landings, and other marine improvements of interest to the town. And the Waterways Committee recommends to the town manager the promulgation of rules, regulations, and fees to be charged for the use of town-owned waterfront piers, bulkheads, blah, blah, blah. So those are really the two
But
main
why don't we have
things.
staff that do that? I don't know.
Why do we or don't
Why
we?
don't we?
Because you want to empower the citizenry to make these recommendations.
And then it goes to the town manager.
Because there's the optics of, nothing occurs in a vacuum, right? So you have things are always changing. So then next thing will be that Crooked Town Council is abolishing all of these advisory boards. They don't want to hear what people have to say out there.
Exactly.
They want to give all the power to the town manager. They want to keep it all for themselves so the president of the town council can make these decisions. You know what I mean? So.
And in terms of
thought of
the,
it-
and in
about
terms
it
of the
that way.
interaction,
Right.
other boards, the
town
Waterways
hire
Committee interacts with the Conservation
new
Commission,
people
Sandy Neck
to
Board,
come in and
Board
do,
of
they won't
Health,
hire new people to come in
Recreation
and do this
Commission,
work,
and
because now they
others
gotta
in
pay
order to
benefits,
seek
and it's too
assurances
costly for the
that
town.
the
which
waterways
is
of
why
the
they
town
have
are properly
freeze
protected and
boards.
managed as a natural resource. So maybe that's where that came in, but that just talks about interactions. So it's interactions with the council, the manager, and other boards. And it's to seek assurances that the waterways of the town are properly protected and managed as a natural resource. I mean, one of the things, like if you decide which committees you're sort of focusing on as a first tier of whatever you're doing, I would really go back then and
Read
look
all
at the
that,
code
each
and
of
see
those.
what the code actually says and see if it reflects
That's
what they're
helpful.
doing, or if it should have something added or removed, or whatever you think. But I would decide what you're focusing on, and then I would go back to the code and take a look at what it says.
And perhaps we need to, because we're working on the code as well, we need to adjust the language there that might refine the task.
Right, if we could make it clearer, or say it's not capturing what they're actually doing and it should be, or they're not doing what they, whatever. But yeah, I think Councilor Burdick's suggestion a while ago of like starting with
Yeah.
a tier of something.
Yes.
Try to
Makes
find the
sense.
ones like the ones that I listed, I think,
Well,
or 5 of those.
why don't you just make the list right now, we'll go with your list.
Got the
Start with
list.
And I'm
I
sorry,
don't even have a
Housing,
pen.
I gotta.
housing.
And we'll need if you want me, if I should contact the department heads, then we'll find out which ones are involved in those
Yeah.
committees.
Yeah, that's a good idea. So make the list and start from the bottom, right? The ones that are
Right.
not as effective as you'd like them
So
to
we'll
be.
start with human services, right? That's the top of the list, meaning that's the bottom.
Or if I
Meaning
did,
that's-
I just haven't read
And then we
it.
remind,
My email lot
if
today.
necessary, the staff of what they're supposed to be doing.
Right.
Yes.
Are they doing that?
Are they doing that?
How, what are they doing versus what do you need them to do better?
I like that, then, like Karen brought up, have the staff look at the code.
Yeah.
Is this being accomplished?
Right.
That gives us the
Then we
cross-check.
could do golf.
Did I say that?
Sounds great.
It's on tape now.
Services, golf.
One good golf set, I think
No,
golf has
all
got,
right.
I think they're pretty, yeah.
Then infrastructure and energy.
Sorry, I gotta run, thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Karen.
you.
Bye,
Thank you,
Karen.
Attorney Nolan. Infrastructure and Energy actually meets twice a month. I think they are.
And they report to, their staff supports DPW.
Are they doing it, or we don't have to put them on that, in that? So far, I've got human services, but who's the next one on the list?
Housing committee?
Housing, you wanna do housing? Okay, so one
That's
is.
Corey, or planning,
Who's the staff support for open space?
probably
and we do
planning.
Open space.
Yeah.
Probably planning, right?
Yeah.
Says
Actually-
Gina Zeno.
Yeah,
Gina Zeno?
Okay, let's
She's
go to,
from
we got
Planning.
human services.
Human
who's
services,
the,
then, oh yeah.
who's the department head for human services that would be underneath that?
There is no department, that's their
I was
problem.
gonna say, I like the way that Counselor Lucky says it, who do
I
they
would
plug
s-
into?
I would
That's a good
say
way
it
to
would
say
probably be the health department is the next closest thing, but they don't technically fall under any department.
Buildings.
Police department should,
So how do
don't we
we-
have a whole community services wing of the police department? that deals with our
Cheryl
homeless
Powell is
staff?
the chair of that committee, if you brought her in.
Chair of what committee?
You're talking about housing.
Housing?
No, human services,
Human services, they don't fall under a department head. Housing falls
Council on
under
Aging?
James Kuffner.
They need
Housing falls under who?
Jim
Comfort.
Kuffner?
Jim Cuff.
Yeah.
Counselor Schmidt.
So human services, then was gonna be after that. Housing.
Which is Jim Kuffner.
Then after that, you wanna do, council on aging or open space?
Both.
Both, well, which,
You're going
in
for
which
five.
order?
Well,
Doesn't matter.
I don't think we have to
I'll talk to them
determine
later.
who's the
Alright,
least.
open space and then council on aging,
You need one more?
that's 4. And then does it go to recreation commission or golf? Or disability?
Really, you think the council on aging, because they're like a division of the
Yeah, they have their
Of
own
the,
thing.
You know what?
of the community.
You know what?
CC.
I
Yeah.
think that perhaps Attorney Cogliano will have to look this up, but I think Council on Aging is in place so that the town can receive state money.
Smart.
Yeah,
Well, we'll
they
skip that
have their
one.
own bylaws.
Because I said, why don't we change the name? Who wants to belong to a council, who wants to belong to something called
Called the
aging?
council on youth.
And I was told because state language
Right.
authorizes,
I
They
think
have
the
to do that.
recreation commission, I mean,
Recreation or golf?
yeah.
maybe recreation and golf is
So
the
does
Maybe they're the same
recreation report to Chris Ganella? Would that be the,
So would the council on aging, right? Because that's all
Yeah,
community
they're
services.
they're a full division,
Community
So
services.
could Chris Canella be the council on aging?
probably.
And-
Oh yes, definitely council on aging.
golf course committee, who would that report to?
That's
DP?
also Chris Canella.
Chris Canella.
Oh, Chris.
Yes.
Because golf, does it have its own director or is that not John Gleason?
Golf, I
No,
think, is
John-
also a division.
Yeah.
I learned this.
Yeah, because they're
This is-
enterprise
John is HYCC
Yeah,
Recreation.
John is not, yeah,
and he does
It's not
the
golf.
field.
He's HYCC.
Yeah, I think it's recreation, golf, council on aging, and another one that I always forget. But I think there's 4 divisions within that department, all obviously overseen by Chris, so he would be able to.
How come
veterans.
Human Services Committee
No,
doesn't
that's
do,
under communications.
or
I think.
Human Services and Community Services are.
what's community
Well,
service?
You're talking about
the Department
community
of,
services.
the Department of Community, we
Maybe
have,
that's what I'm
We
thinking.
have a Department of Community Services.
isn't that what it's called?
When-
Community Affairs?
No,
No,
Chris
Chris
Ganella's got
Ganella's.
the job.
Oh, Chris Ganella,
Chris
that's right.
Canella's
Lynn used to
department
do
is
it,
Department
now
of
it's Chris
Community
Ganella.
Services, isn't it?
What's the name
Yeah,
of Chris
let me tell you.
Ganella?
And then there's a recreation division.
Yeah, that's
What's
part
So
of
community
it.
service, yeah, I'll tell you right now.
So
'Cause
we-
it-
Community services.
Community services.
Community Services is the
Yeah.
big department that does recreation and the
Yes.
council on aging and
Council-
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, you
Aging,
think of any
youth,
place, that's
veterans.
where
Right.
human services would
Senior.
plug in,
Right.
yeah.
Humans and community, this is a
Right.
community of humans after all.
Yeah, I just don't know that they would have, I don't know, and this obviously is a question for Chris, whether they have that, like a tool to help in that situation, but, so yeah, community services is council on aging, the golf, recreation, and I guess youth services.
yeah.
But veteran services is also under there, and then the HYCC.
Veteran services is under there?
Yeah,
So it sounds like community services should be the place where human services plugs in.
So that's under Chris Canella?
yeah, I just don't know, in looking at like his divisions, I don't know where, they would
We
go.
can go after that later on, because
Yeah,
it seems like that would be the logical place for us to establish our human services person to, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
If as a town, not for this committee necessarily, but, because if you can get the community, we have that whole community, the community services part of the police department, like, used to be Sergeant Ross who was in charge of it on Main Street, where they have that special community service office,
Right.
and they deal with the homeless population and maintaining, that whole thing.
That's separate from the town community services.
Yeah, but that's what I mean, but why
But
would
that's
it?
a kind of a
Right.
natural flow of
It
human
should be.
services. It should
Like, If
be,
you're dealing with the homeless population, and that's part of the Human Services Committee's
that
purview.
is, yes.
Plus the drug issues, plus the youth is a part, you know what I mean, like the whole thing. If they,
I think that
if
makes a
that
lot
were,
of sense.
if this committee were if that had representation on it of those bodies, like someone from community services, someone from police, someone, whatever, then it could be useful.
That's
But
a
it-
great point.
You know what I mean, but it's not, so, anyway, we can talk about it when we go through the list of the 5.
All right, so you're gonna take these 5 and
All
then
right,
you're
so,
gonna,
sorry, Betty.
no, I just did.
I
Tell
got
us
Chris
what you-
Canella on 3 of them. Open space, who's open space?
I'm the liaison for that. And
Oh.
it's,
Kelly Colopy?
no,
No, no.
it's,
was
Would be
it
the
planning?
department
assistant,
head.
yeah, assistant to Jim. His name escapes me right now. to
Well,
Jim
it'd be
Cupfer.
Jim Cupfer.
Fettuccini, Cal?
Yeah,
He's-
Kyle Petticini has been coming to our meetings, because right now the Open Space Committee is dealing with updating the town's open space and recreation plan. So that's similar, but not as robust as the LCP, the local comprehensive.
But we'd go to
Is the
Jim,
rec-
we wouldn't go to Kyle for this
Right.
request.
Is the Recreation Commission, I know you don't know this necessarily, would the Recreation Commission also be working with the open space to be updating the open
Oh, yes, they
space and
do.
recreation plan?
Yeah.
Like,
They
it
don't,
seems like two groups should be working on that.
well, that's true.
Well, I mean, it's the Recreation Commission, so
Just by this conversation, you can see that maybe it isn't necessarily the committees that's the problem, though it may well be. But it's the overall, and like, I've been saying this for a year, or since I've been on the council, whatever.
Just understanding how they work.
Yeah, but not, yeah, understanding how they work, but also, it's the composition, functionality, and effectiveness. Maybe that there are institutional barriers to their effectiveness, based on no one having really thought about how you can tie them together, or what they, how to best motivate and equip them to actually accomplish something.
Well, like you
But I think
said,
that's
well, it's not,
Betty's
they
point.
want to do work. I
Yeah,
mean,
they
they
want.
want to participate, but if they're sitting there, I mean, Human Services, I told them straight out, I said, I've gone to the same meeting
Yeah.
for 2 years. It's the same meeting.
I know.
But if they were given a thing, do this, right?
So rather than
or if they developed a thing, they could bring it to somebody
Right.
to have something done with
Sure.
it.
So maybe that should be that's part of our charge, obviously, because then we can, if we bring them in, if we have these committees and we say how they're non-functional, and we get talking to people, and we all think of a way that they can be valued to the community, and that it can be work that's not just, wasted away or
Yeah.
futile effort, that this all feeds back into what I've been saying, which is that we need to have a strategy as a town and as a legislative body, which
Yes,
we
we
don't
do.
have. So,
We don't have it.
we're all spinning our wheels, going in our different directions with all this different stuff. But in the meantime, here we can see, just based on sitting here we've had a number of meetings, but this is a productive one, where we can see some functional obstacles that we can easily eliminate. We can make the Human Services Committee more valuable and useful and actually effective by involving the Community Services Department and the community of the town, and then the Community Services aspect of the Police Department,
Absolutely.
to create something that then might actually come up with something that we can use legislatively to make the town a better place to live.
I'm excited, I think this
Yeah,
is.
like
couldn't-
the,
be
like
good.
instead of the ad hoc housing committee that we had that was under the
We never
town
should have
council,
had
we
that.
should have
Right.
given that
To
to
the
the housing
housing.
committee.
And empower them
That
with the
have
message.
specialists on there that deal with the housing,
Right.
Yeah, but honestly,
and we didn't do that.
the housing committee doesn't really have that many specialists
No, they
related to
don't.
housing. So I think.
No, I
think-
mean staff-wise, Corey Pacheco, they've got Laura Schufel, who knows everything about the mass housing, I don't know, they could have looked at what we looked at as a subcommittee and
Well, we can use this as an opportunity to find out what the answers are to these questions. Which of these really need to go? Which of these we can reimagine in order to have them be effective and to actually contribute where now they aren't?
And while you have those particular staff members, whether it's a conversation just between Counselor Crowe and them or whatever, or if they come in here, you can also say, hey, by the way, you're also staff to this, this, and this. How's that going, by the way?
Sure.
And so it gives them an opportunity also to bring that up, and then we're getting a few more done as well. It's not exactly the concentration of this list, but it's also saying, we're not so concerned about this, but what is your opinion on how this is working out?
Yes.
If I may, I like Cindy's suggestion or comparison to the housing committee and the ad hoc, because I know that was I was uncomfortable with the two parallel committees working on the same thing. But what happened is the ad hoc committee, right out of the gate, had staff support and was videotaped, whereas the housing didn't have the staff support. So that's why I believe it kind of languishes, because the ad hoc committee came on with full court press and staff support.
yeah, because
I
IT
think-
doesn't have the
I-
support to do advisory committees.
I think
That-
also the point, more to the point though too, Chris, is that the reason why the ad hocs could actually have some movement is because they were directed to literally report back to the town council with actual
Yeah.
action steps.
True.
Versus the housing committee right now,
Kind of flounder.
or the human services, they get together, they socialize, they do their thing, I'm not making that up, but they don't produce anything, they're not tasked to produce anything, they're not required to produce anything, they don't have anybody that they're plugged into.
They might,
So
we have
they're
to look at the code.
operating in a vacuum by themselves and not doing anything. Whereas the ad hocs are like, you have a time thing, this is your charge, and please come back to us and make some recommendations. And then it's our responsibility as the council to hopefully take up those recommendations because those groups did the deep dive.
Yeah.
As opposed to human services sitting around talking about something and never going anywhere with it,
Yeah.
so.
So are we gonna give, these department heads like a month? I mean, you're gonna send this out in short order, give them a month to come back to us, or come back and discuss it? Like Karen says, we should discuss it in an open forum.
I'm just thinking we set up the next meeting or next two meetings and we ask Chris Ganella and then Jim Cuffer to come to whichever ones they're involved in. Those are the two, of all the people we say, Ganella's over 3 of them and Jim is over 2.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if it might be beneficial just to work through the town manager and, because I'm not so sure we want to beat up staff to come to more meetings, but maybe they can write an opinion. What do you think?
They'd probably be happy to
I
come.
think we need a
I think
Yeah,
discussion.
I mean, if they're unable to commit, then, you know, they can at least, I mean, I think when you email Jim Kupfer or Chris, I mean, I don't know who's actually attending, the opens, oh, you said,
Kyle?
yeah, but,
Leave it to them.
golf, like, I don't know who's actually attending golf or is supporting golf, and
The golf
golf, it may not be.
superintendent. I've seen them.
Right, so, and same with housing, it's Corey, so Jim wouldn't necessarily have to come, it would be Corey, or Corey, I'm sure would be happy to like draft up an email, send it back to Counselor Crowe and say, this is my thoughts, and then we can share it at the table. I mean, that's an
I would
option.
prefer
In
to have
person would
them
be
in
so much
person.
more valuable.
Yeah, I just think giving them the option, I mean, if it's really a problem, then,
They'll be fine. I
Yeah.
I
think.
just
And
see
if
Jim
we-
Cupfer every evening at a meeting here.
yeah.
So I'm just trying to,
I definitely think that
It'll be-
copying the
Take
town
ride.
manager on whatever email you're sending to the department heads would be helpful, just so that, because town
He's their
manager,
boss,
that's
right.
the boss. So, you know, for these department heads, so that would be helpful too,
Yeah.
just
Just
giving.
send Mark Ellis an
letting him-
email, say, I would like to, you know, we're thinking of doing this. You know what I
solicit
mean?
staff support.
This is how we wanna go forward with this, and we're requesting some staff support. We have the following committees, you know, that we wanna look at. Something like that, and then
Oh, wait,
say-
listen, why don't, I
Why
thought
do
we
we
were
have
just,
to ask town manager Ellis permission to do this?
Ah.
These are committees of
This
the
is
town
his-
council. I think we include him in the emails, but I think we
No,
Yeah,
have.
we're
he's
just
boss of staff.
CCing.
We can't tell staff, we don't order staff what to
Yeah.
do with their time. They have to go through their boss.
Yeah, but we just ask him, and then he'll ask them, and then Chris Ganella can say he's gonna send whomever, the golf guy, whatever, and then
I've gotten in trouble before.
Jim can
I think
send-
Karen wanted you to do the
send
town
someone.
manager because he's in charge of the department heads. The department heads will choose the best person
Yeah.
in the department that can come to this committee to talk about their prospective committee that they've been assigned to. Because it's the department
You wanna
heads that
write us a nice
assign the
email?
staff to
Write us a
the,
nice
No, I
email
think
to
we
Mark?
should write the email.
Who, me? No, John.
I just,
why don't you just call him on the phone?
There you go.
there you go, that's it.
you can do that, John, and just tell them what your objective is. We're trying to find out which committees are what their purpose is, what they're working
That's
on.
easiest.
And then the town manager, leave it up to him as to who he
I
sends.
hate writing emails. I always call people.
Yeah,
Why make it complicated?
Well, if you call Els, then he'll have to write the email.
Then he writes.
That's right, then
He
he'll
loves
have
it.
to
It's not
write
really
it.
fair either.
all I'm gonna say is
Yeah, but
I'll
he
call
has
Mark
to
and let him know, then I'll ask him to
Yes.
send the person,
No, no,
for each
I know
one of
what
these
it
5
is.
committees
Yeah.
that can talk to us.
That can just describe what they're working on currently and whether or
Yeah.
not they interact like they're supposed to
And
with their
how
other
we can
charge.
help them or decide whether they should merge some of these committees or
Yeah.
whatever, get staff to them, and that'd be easy. If you merge them, you have more of a chance of getting staff to them. But we have to discuss our next meetings, we'll have to give them a time when we can do this. So we're in May, what do you think?
You can put, I mean, I'm available in the afternoons all the time, unless I'm not. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? So it's
Yeah.
like, I don't mind, I'll meet whenever, as I always say, you guys pick your times and then I'll work around it.
Okay. Karen, what does it look like? I mean, Cindy.
Let's see.
Wednesday's a good day for me.
Wednesdays are?
Yeah, I'm pretty open most of
This,
those.
this Wednesday at 3:30 works well.
So,
And I've got to run here in just about 5 minutes.
So do I got another
Time
LCP
flies.
meeting.
well, any Wednesday, you give me a date and I'll get it booked with IT.
How about Wednesday the 14th?
14th?
Yeah.
All right.
You
I
got it?
can't,
Okay.
yeah.
Uh,
That particular one, I'm actually leaving the office early because my cousin's graduating from high school and she plays rugby and I haven't been to one game, so.
Oh, she's
And
in
she
trouble.
lives in Belmont, so it's just hard for me to, but this one's way.
21st, John?
If anybody's.
21st, everybody okay with 21st?
Yeah.
And I'll ask Mark for whoever of those 5 committees, and we'll get two people here, 3 people.
Yeah.
And we'll just go round robin like it did.
Right.
And then we can make some decisions.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds great.
All right, 421 at 3:30.
3:30.
Oh, yeah, thank you for letting me borrow. I had no pen. I forgot all about it.
May 21?
Yeah, 521 at 3:30.
No, I know, I thought you said 421.
Oh, no, sorry.
No, I knew what you meant, but I just wanted to make sure you ran it down.
Oh, no, that's all right. I didn't need it. I needed it then, buddy.
Okay, I will do
Thank
so,
you.
and we'll see what we can get accomplished then.
Okay.
We just need to focus, and I'm not sure.
I
mean,
understand.
This is sort of complicated with a lot of
It
moving
is.
parts.
Sure.
Why
but I
we
think-
pick a place to start.
Yeah, but I think, okay, so it was easy to eliminate those committees that haven't been meeting for a
Yeah.
decade.
Yeah.
But now we're getting into the
Mhm.
difficult decisions.
And we don't even have to, it doesn't even have to be eliminate necessarily,
Right,
because
it can
we're
be
trying to.
fortify,
Yeah, we're trying to assess whatever that
make them effective.
purpose, composition, functionality, and effectiveness.
All of the above.
Yeah, so if we can come up with ways to help to make them more effective, to better serve the town and themselves and us, then that will be just fine too. You know what I mean?
I'm just
So-
putting this out there that we're probably overdue to have a annual town report where the committees used to submit a page on what was
They
accomplished.
still do, to Lynn Poyant. They still do.
I don't think they've done it, though.
They haven't done it since 2019 because of COVID. But none of the departments, there hasn't been a Barnstable report since 2019, so.
Really?
Okay.
I think they're working on it, but I'm just saying that's one way to track the effectiveness
We
of the
don't have an
committees is
annual
when they
report. We have
do
an
that
annual
annual.
We can't do that until we get a strategy.
Yeah, we need to figure a lot of stuff out. We really
Are you ready for me to
have.
move to adjourn?
One more quick question. I apologize for earlier, but one of the issues I was talking about, we were all going on for a minute, is one of the reasons I'm sitting here. Okay, it's that important to me. So I just want to apologize for that, but I think it's something we should look into. So we have a move to adjourn.
I move that we.
Second.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Hi.
Aye.
All right, thanks.
Well
Thank
done.
you.
Yeah,